within the gigantic body of the cosmic manifestation. They falsely conclude that the body is everything, that there is nothing beyond it. Similarly, they think that the material creation, which is the universal body, is factually governed only by the laws of nature. Any discussion on this subject is invariably put to premature death by their insistence that nature is the be-all and end-all. The more intelligent among them carry this discussion a little further and postulate that impersonalism is the quintessence of everything. But far beyond this realm of manifest and unmanifest material nature is the transcendental and eternal state. The atheists, however, are characteristically unable to believe in its existence. So there's a very brilliant analysis by Srila Prabhupada of the atheistic point of view, which is very prevalent today. And first of all, he says that becoming first enamored of and then deluded by Vivartavada, the theory of evolution. So, the theory of evolution rejects any existence of a supernatural being or God. And it says that things just happened through permutations and combinations over a very long period of time on the basis of the principle of survival of the fittest. And things just happened. You know, and first there was one amoeba, one-celled living being, and it developed into a 2-cell, 4-cell, 8-cell, and so forth. Then all of a sudden there's a human being, and all different species. So that is a preposterous, ridiculous conclusion. And because they cannot see the existence of an individual soul within the body, they cannot see the existence of the supersoul in the universe, or in other words, the presence of Krishna in every atom of the universe. So, in the third verse of the 13th chapter, Chetragyam Chapimam Piti Sarva Chetra Subharata Chetra Chetra Yayor Jnanam Yattaj Jnanam Matam Mama. Krishna speaking to Arjuna says, you should understand that I am also the knower in all bodies. And to understand this body and its knower is called knowledge. That is my opinion. And the purport, Prabhupada makes it very clear. While discussing the subject of the body and the knower of the body, the soul and the supersoul, we shall find 3 different topics of study: the Lord, the living entity, and matter. In every field of activities, in every body, there are 2 souls: the individual soul and the supersoul. Because the supersoul is the plenary expansion of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, Krishna says, I am also the knower, but I am not the individual knower of the body. I am the super knower. I am present in every body as the Paramatma or supersoul. So, if we accept the atheistic point of view of materialistic evolution, and that if there is a soul, it's part of material evolution. So this precludes any research from that point on of God. And it assumes that everything is made of either a combination of atoms or a combination of molecules or a combination of elements. And that there's no use talking about a God or an eternal soul. Everything is transitory, and it all happened by accident. So, if one goes up a little notch, and then they believe in Buddhism, then they think that there's an absolute inertial state, and that's the which is static, And that's the perfection of human existence. Or you go up another little notch, you believe that there's an eternal emanating energy called Brahma Jyoti, and everyone merges into that. They're all atheistic philosophies, even the Brahma Jyoti concept, because all of them deny the personality of Godhead. In this way, with their perverted minds bereft of far-sightedness, demoniac men perform activities that bring only misery to the people. And as a result of many such unwanted misery, and as a result of many such unwanted activities, the atom bomb was discovered. The endless plans that these demonic men chalk out can never bode well for humanity. Well, Prabhupada is basically paraphrasing the 16th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, where he says that 16th chapter, verse number 8, 9. They say that this world is unreal, with no foundation, no God in control. They say it's produced a sex desire and has no cause other than lust. And what did he say here? And then that they're also engaged in horrible activities meant for destruction of the world. Let's see, which one is that? Okay. Those who are demoniac do not know what is to be done, what is not to be done. Neither cleanliness nor proper behavior nor truth is found in them. They say that this world is unreal, with no foundation, no God in control. They say this produces sex desire and has no cause other than lust.
9.
Huh?
9th verse of 16.
That's this one. Following such conclusions, the demonic, who are lost to themselves and have no intelligence, engage in unbeneficial, horrible works meant to destroy the world. The demoniac are engaged in activities that will lead the world to destruction. The Lord states here that they are less intelligent. The materialists, who have no concept of God, think that they are advancing, but according to Bhagavad Gita, they are unintelligent and devoid of all sense. They try to enjoy this material world to the utmost limit, and therefore always engage in inventing something for sense gratification. Such materialistic inventions are considered to be advancement of human civilization, but the result is that people grow more and more violent and more cruel to animals and cruel to other human beings. They have no idea how to behave toward one another. Animal killing is very prominent amongst demoniac people. Such people are considered the enemies of the world because ultimately they will invent or create something which will bring destruction to all. Indirectly, this verse anticipates the invention of nuclear weapons, of which the whole world is today very proud. At any moment, war may take place, and these atomic weapons may create havoc. Such things are created solely for the destruction of the world, and this is indicated here. Due to godlessness, such weapons are invented in human society. They are not meant for peace, for the peace and prosperity of the world. So, this book or booklet was written by Prabhupada in the 1950s, and obviously he's consistent in his analysis. So he says, as a result of many such unwanted activities, the atom bomb was discovered. The endless plans of these demonic men chalk out, the endless plans that these demoniac men chalk out can never bode well for humanity, and so forth. In the past, Ravana attempted to build a stairway to heaven, claiming this was for humanity's benefit. Actually, he was trying to cheat the Supreme Lord Ramachandra, but he was unsuccessful. History repeats itself, for now we find that Ravana's descendants are attempting to cheat the Lord in the name of planning to benefit society. The thing to take note of is that no demon will complement other demons' plans. Every demon will declare that since his plan is the most wonderful, all others must vote for him. Then an opponent will say that in actuality his plan is the best, and hence he should rightfully be given all the votes. In this age of votes, the fighting over who is to actually get the votes has untimely broken all the stairways to heaven. So Prabhupada is very poetic here. If one calmly considers the facts, one will easily conclude that all these plans manufactured by the perverted brains of the demons with their myopic vision can never bring peace in the world. Of course, in one matter, all the demons readily agree, and that is to surreptitiously enjoy Lakshmi, the goddess of fortune, an eternal consort of the Supreme Lord, without the knowledge of the Lord himself. So that's what Ravana wanted to do. He wanted to enjoy Sita and take her away from Ram. And the demons are very expert in trying to take Lakshmi away from Narayana. What's interesting here is that history repeats itself, and the demons, modern demons or descendants of Ravana, are attempting to cheat the Lord in the name of planning to benefit society. Now this, if you ever study American history, you'll see that Franklin Delano Roosevelt, he came up with the idea of the New Deal. This was a program to save American society that had that was going through the recession. A lot of people were suffering. Late 20s, but the entire 30s, right up to the end of World War II. Yeah. What saved America was the war, because they were able to enlist millions of men in the army and give them some training and something to do, right? And then they were able to have a military government, suspend many civil liberties, and industrialize and put everyone to work forcibly, and also control the economy. And in this way, they were able to save the country from collapsing, basically. In the 1930s, communism was very popular in the United States. Many prominent Americans, like the father of the Kennedys, Joe Kennedy, he liked Hitler. But there were many other people that were attracted to communism. Why did Joe Kennedy like Hitler? Because Hitler was a dictator. But actually, when Franklin Delano Roosevelt took over, they started a lot of social welfare programs, communistic concepts. And then, when the war broke out, they virtually had a military government, taking control of everything. Then after the New Deal, there were other so-called plans to save American society. John Kennedy, then Lyndon Johnson, they all came up with these different plans. And today you have Trump, you had Obama also had his plans, now you have Trump. None of these plans will succeed because they all ignore the existence of God or Krishna. They all think that through economics, through social engineering, etc., that you can make people happy. You make a few people happy, you make most people miserable. So here we have an analysis of that by Prabhupada in the 1950s. Also, communism failed because there was a constant fight going on internally of who would be the leader of the Communist Party. And it was a vicious fight, often. And although communism means to have a levels, let's say, no social classes, just everyone's a worker and they all work for the common good. But even though they wanted to have a classless society, they violently tried to eliminate the classes in the beginning of the Communist Revolution. But then they just appeared again in a different way. But the four classes were still there. You had the intellectuals, you had and you had the politicians and kshatriyas, and then you had the businessmen. But the businessmen, on paper, did not own the factories, but they ran the factories. Yeah, oligarchs, not oligarchs, oligarch. Yeah, these are people that basically are cronies of the dictator, and that there was no real communistic society. There was more or less a dictatorship. So, and the reason that it failed is because there was always a fight who would be the dictator. So it began with Stalin, and then afterwards it was there were other people that came in. Hare Krishna. Yeah. Well, you have a safe trip. Please chant Hare Krishna, Hare Bol, and hopefully you'll come back. Hare Bol, Hare Krishna. Every demon is vainly proud, thinking no one is more intelligent and esteemed than himself. Therefore, the overpowering desires that urge him on to perform various activities are, according to him, ultimately beneficial for human society. In the end, of course, it is inevitably revealed that all his aspirations were illusory and unrealistic. Yet despite this revelation, the demons continue to influence the populace through manipulations and lies. Well, the first victim of a war is the truth, because one has to convince people that war is necessary. Yeah, it's necessary because almost all wars are fought for dominance in sense gratification. But if people have control of their senses, then there wouldn't be war. But through materialistic philosophies and materialistic society, people can't control the desire for sense gratification. Therefore, there's a constant fight for domination in order to exploit the spoils or the riches of nature. There's competition for who is going to be the dominant person or dominant country. So we see that many countries around the world are resentful of the United States because the United States dominates economically and militarily, right? So it creates competition. So you just read the newspaper and you'll see this. There's the same competition now that there was during the Cold War years, after World War II, leading up to the collapse of the Soviet Union, between the United States and the Soviet Union. And after the Soviet Union collapsed, then it was China. So now China and Soviet Union have come closer together, and it's the United States against China and the Soviet Union. Sometimes they join together to knock out anybody else that wants to join that competitive race. So they work together to get rid of ISIS and extreme, Muslim extremism. They don't want anybody else to join the club. But and now there's an escalation toward war. It's not serious. It's who is going to dominate the Middle East? Is it going to be, because before Russia was not a major player in the Middle East. But because of the weakness of the Obama administration, Russia now has become a major player. Now, on the other hand, the United States, with hawkish, political leaning right now, is vying with Russia to see who's going to be prominent in the Middle East. Middle East, of course, we're talking about oil, and we're talking about the Arab or the Muslim-Israeli, fight. So we see that there is. It's not a question of this is unique. All throughout history, there's been competition for sense gratification on an individual level, family level, neighborhood level, nation level, and it has never stopped until people learn to control their mind and their senses and realize that there's a supreme controller, Krishna. They will continue to be pseudo-controllers or false controllers, and in the process create wars and all kinds of suffering for people. But in order to convince people of the necessity of war, they have to lie. Just like George Bush lied with Colin Powell that there were weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. Of course, there were some, but by the time they invaded Iraq, there were no more weapons of mass. The Iraqis were forced to destroy them or put them into hiding. So, and then it was always that, Iraq posed a threat to the United States. Iraq never posed any threat to the United States. And it was the first time in United States history that we invaded a country that was not an enemy. Right? Usually we only invaded countries that were enemies, that started a war with the United States. This is the first time that there was a preemptive strike on a country that was not in a state of war with the United States. Well, yeah, Senior Bush did the first war with Iraq, and then the second. Yeah. Well, George Bush wanted to start a war with Iraq because Saddam Hussein tried to assassinate his father. And he wanted to get back at him. So we see that what Prabhupada is describing here is exactly the correct characterization of modern politicians. There's no limits to the imagination of these unclean and deluded demons. They pose as self-styled leaders and endlessly worry about the welfare of society. They worry, for example, about where to lodge the people who come to purchase in the marketplace. What they actually think about is how to make foolproof arrangements to secure their own long-lasting enjoyment, along with their children's, their grandchildren's, and their great-grandchildren's enjoyment up to the final dissolution of the world. But when they experience suffering instead of pleasure, the demons revert to violence against their fellow men to accumulate wealth. Their material desires are insatiable, and so even billions of dollars cannot appease them. Whoever is expert in illegally amassing huge fortunes becomes the top dog. You see how witty Prabhupada is, the top dog, right? The demons are full of hate, greed, anger, lust, and so on, and they are tireless in their efforts to illicitly amass great wealth merely to gratify their sensual urges. On the other hand, their competitors are no less expert in cheating them of their black wealth. How can such ruthless competition aimed at stealing one another's illegally earned money bring about peace and prosperity? Hence, the demons can never help the person who laments, in the dispensation of providence, man cannot have any rest. So, that's a poetic phrase taken from an article in the Amrita Bazar Patrika, written sometime in the 1950s, where an Indian writer, newspaperman, was lamenting the fact that previously, under the British, there was a massacre in Jallianwala Bagh in 1919 by the British. They massacred 2,000, I guess, Punjabis. Was it in Punjab? Yeah. And he's writing somewhere in the 1950s, basically saying, well, nothing has changed. We got rid of the British, but the political problems are still there in our country. In fact, they've gotten worse. So then he makes this poetic phrase where he says that in the dispensation of providence, he means in the way fate is beleaguering people today, man cannot have any rest. So dispensation of providence is a very poetic phrase. It means providence in a sense is like fate. That fate, or the destiny, the present destiny of human beings, is very unfortunate because there are still political problems just as grave, in fact worse, than they were under the British. That's what he's saying. In fact, he says, the nation's week began with the memories of Jallianwala Bagh, and political serfdom no longer troubles us. But our troubles are far from being at an end. In the dispensation of providence, mankind cannot have any rest. If one kind of trouble goes, another quickly follows. India, politically free, is faced with difficulties that are no less serious than the troubles under foreign rule. So he's saying, we got rid of the British, but we couldn't get rid of the political problems. Right. Why? Because there's no difference between the British and the Indians politicians. They're both competing for domination. Okay, they threw the British out. Now they're not competing with the British. Now the Indians are competing with the Indians. Right? But again, for sense gratification. What's interesting, today I was hearing something on the radio of a Christian radio television station where they were interviewing a Christian preacher, a very prominent Christian preacher, and he was speaking about the Vice President of the United States, Mike Pence, who wrote a letter saying that he takes very seriously his vow of marriage, and because of that, he never is alone with a woman other than his wife, and that he would think it's inappropriate of him to be alone with a woman other than his wife. So he's been very seriously attacked by the liberal media. People are saying, oh, this is a type of sexism, blah, blah, blah. So then this preacher, he explained that previously a group of Christian preachers, most prominent Christian preachers in the United States about 40 years ago, came together, 5 of them, and they made a vow that each of them would never be unfaithful to their wife and would never be alone with a woman other than their wife. Right? And all of them have kept that vow up until today. Right? And the vice president happens to be a very serious Christian, and he was talking about that same vow, right? But he's being attacked by all the liberals. So they were talking about it. Now, that's the vow that we follow also. That we accept the fact that we should only be, men and women should only be loyal to their husband or their wife from the day of marriage right up to death, right? And that there should never be any philandering, there should never be any loose association, and men should never be alone, married men should never be alone with a woman other than their wife. So not being alone means you don't go out to a private dinner or you don't sit in a room alone, and things like that. Now, some people think, oh, this is very old-fashioned. It's based on a paternalistic society where women are looked down upon. No, it's a question of faithfulness. Just like Sita was always faithful to her husband Ram, and Ram was always faithful to Sita. This is nothing new, right? And when Sita was kidnapped, Ram didn't say, oh, well, she's gone, I'll find another Sita. No, he did everything to get her back, and he did. So, and there was very dire consequences for Ravana, who kidnapped Sita. He was killed, and everyone that followed Ravana, except maybe for Vibhishan, who surrendered to Ram, they were all killed, because it's a very serious thing. In fact, Lord Ram also killed Vali, because Vali had taken his brother's wife, Sugriva's wife. So we see that there are certain Christians that take the vow of marriage extremely seriously, because the whole stability of society is based on that vow of fidelity or faithfulness to each other. And how do people stay faithful to each other? They're not faithful to their bodies, they're faithful in prayer and service to God together. So that's what the Christians do. They pray together, they go to church together, and they engage in, pious activities together, husband and wife. And so and therefore they're not so interested. And we're talking about Christians now, but you have pious Muslims also. You have pious Hindus. You have pious Buddhists and so forth. The demon is always ruminating, meaning he's always thinking on how to increase his bank balance. Today the stocks have gone up, and so also have my profits. Tomorrow, if these other commodities become dearer, my bank balance will further increase, and so my future looks bright and prosperous. So the way capitalists make money is by creating a scarcity. Like, for example, let's say you purchase all the silver futures for the next 3 years. I mean, that's a huge amount of money, right? Therefore, because you have possession of all the silver that's going to be produced in the future, somewhere down the line, and if you don't sell any of it, somewhere down the line the price goes up, because every year people need silver. Maybe not today, maybe not next year, maybe not the year after, but the year after that, there will be more demand for silver than is on the market. So you force the price to go up by buying out all the future production of silver for the next 3 years, let's say, and then you hold it back from being sold on the market. You create scarcity, then the price goes up, and then you sell it. Now, it's not a question of buy at a low price and sell at a high price. They manipulate the market so that there is scarcity. That's why do you think there's such fluctuation in the price of oil? Oil sometimes goes up to $5 a gallon, and then it comes down to $2.20 a gallon. Then now it's creeping up again. Now it's at $3 a gallon. It's based on supply and demand, but the supply and demand can be manipulated. So when they want, just like Saudi Arabia helped to drop the price of oil because they wanted to destroy the American fracking industry. So they dropped the price of oil down to $2 a barrel. You can buy gasoline $2.10, $2.20 a gallon, right? It was up to $4 or $5 and went down again. But now, after 3 years like that, right, the Saudis are feeling the pinch, the Russians are feeling the pinch. So now they're getting together and holding back production so that the supply of oil becomes less, but the demand is going up. So now the price is gradually going up again. So they control these markets, the commodity markets, in that way. And they can make billions and billions of dollars by doing that. So these are all tricks of capitalism.
The fraction of commodities that are traded in actually physical way is like a fraction of a person. Like most of it is all paper based.
Well, yes, based on betting that something will go up or down in the future. It's gambling. It's pure gambling. But there's plenty of room for cheating also, right? And there's a lot of cheating. Like, for example, the biggest dealers in the stock market, they have the most fastest machines, computers, for buying and selling. So previously, what happened in previous times, like the Rothschild family in Europe, they had control of the Wells Fargo, the delivery of news from one country to another. You know, they delivered with horse carriages, right, and boats. So during the war between France and England, Napoleon was defeated by the British at Waterloo, right? The Rothschilds purposely held the information back for 2 days. And they sold short on the Paris stock market, knowing that Napoleon was defeated, but nobody else knew yet. And then they held back the information. They sold short, meaning they bet that the stock market was going down. So they sold all their stocks. And then they released the information that Napoleon lost the decisive battle of Waterloo. After that, he was finished. The British imprisoned him, and Napoleon's empire crumbled, right? The stock market crashed. When it crashed, the Rothschilds had the money to buy all the stocks, right? And then it went up again, right? After the dust settled from the defeat. So, but today the same thing is happening, but it's not a question of 1, 2, or 3 or 4 days. It's a question of seconds. It's a question of seconds, right? So now what they did is they put all the computer, what do you call it? They're not terminals, but they're the exchanges right in the stock exchange. And they're the fastest computers in the world, right? But the stockbrokers are also allowed to have computers in the stock exchange. And theirs are even faster than the stock exchange computers, right? All you have to do is have a fraction of a second speed, and you can make millions and millions of dollars, you see. So it's the same principle, but the time differential has seriously decreased down to a fraction of a second. Not 1 second, we're talking about a fraction of a second, you know. So how can you exist in a world like this where there's so much cheating, you see? The only way a person can exist in a world like this is to go back to a simple way of life, you know, where you're not hurt by such fluctuations. Otherwise, normal people get wiped out, you know, through inflation, through war, through stock market volatility, etc., etc. Just like, you know, you buy a house at when the market is high, and then there's a downturn, you lose your job, and the value of the house goes below the amount you owe to the bank, right? They take your house away. Everything you invested in a house is lost. Everything. And people sometimes end up homeless after having a house, buying a house, having a car. The car is taken away, the house is taken away, you can't pay anymore, and you lose your job, and people are ruined, right? by all these manipulated variations in markets and money values and so forth. And what happens? People revert to violence. There's revolutions. The French Revolution, they grabbed all the nobles and they cut their heads off. Because the people were starving in the streets in France. And that almost happened in the 1930s in the United States. Almost. There was a very strong movement for a communist takeover in the United States. And then also the Nazi movement was prominent in the United States. Okay. The demon continues to think, but now on a slightly different subject. One of my enemies has already been destroyed, and another one is soon to meet his end. This puts me in a more secure position. So now that I have become adept at eliminating my enemies, I am God Almighty. Well, you could say this is Vladimir Putin. He kills his enemies, Or you could say it's Pinochet in Chile. Pinochet was famous. All his political opponents and political agitators, he would give them a free airplane ride over the Atlantic Ocean, open the door of the plane and push them out. Now, it sounds funny, but he actually did that to many, many people. Because you can never find their bodies. Right? They just disappear. And there was a big number of wives that formed an organization. Their husbands had disappeared. They were all political enemies of Pinochet. And there were thousands of them. Right? So I am God Almighty because I have eliminated my enemies. Why must you look in search of God? Hundreds of gods are floating right before your eyes. Such thoughts and actions make the demons more and more atheistic, and thus they refuse to hear the transcendental message of God. They proudly declare, who is God? Why, I am God. Who is God? Why, I am God, they say. When I can illegally manipulate funds and become so wealthy that I can enjoy everything in this world, then I am indeed Almighty God. I am strong and happy and accomplished. Those who are weaklings, without money and means, must respect me as God. What is the use of crying after any other God? Well, this could describe George Soros, who was a multi-billionaire, who was a manipulator of foreign exchange currencies. He's a manipulator of politics. He is a major donor to all kinds of political movements in the United States and in Europe and in the ex-Soviet Union. He's the one that funded the marijuana laws, making them legal in several states in the United States. He is one who's funding open borders. Now, why would a person who's a capitalist, right, want to do things like that? Because the more the political institutions in a country are weak, the more he can manipulate. He's not loyal to any country, although he's an American citizen. Now he's a Hungarian, but now he became an American citizen. They're not loyal to any country. They just manipulate countries, through monetary, through currencies, through cheating on the stock market and so forth. The demons are under the impression that no one is more wealthy and popular than themselves. They think that their wealth will somehow be protected by some spirit, and in this way they are deluded. Their final destination is hell. Many of these demons, they communicate with dead people that they consider were bigger demons than themselves, right? So Franklin Delano Roosevelt, was communicating with such spirits. And most of these big people believe in these type of phony esoterical concepts. The few religious deeds that the demons perform are merely a show. They are meant only to flatter their false ego and bring them more recognition and respect. They perform them only for their own sense enjoyment and are invariably acts of violence. The demons engage in these rituals without following the scriptural injunctions, merely to appease their vain glory. Strutting with false pride, strength, anger, lust, and so on, the demons become totally absorbed in bodily consciousness, thinking, this is my body, I am Indian, Bengali, and so on. He is a Muslim, he is a Hindu, he is a German. In this way, they perpetuate acts of violence on others. The Supreme Lord repeatedly puts these most abominable, wretched sinners into the most distressful conditions, constantly punishing them with his stringent laws of nature, or Daivi Maya, meaning the laws of nature. Thus, taking repeated births as demons, these reprobates can never appreciate the transcendental pastimes, names, beauty, and so on of the Supreme Lord. Gradually, cultivating the impersonal knowledge of the Absolute, they are destined to suffer the worst possible life. So, this says, Andam tamaha pravisanti, andam tamaha pravisanti, ye vidyam upasyate, tato bhuya ivate tamo, ya yuvidyayam rataha. So the Ishopanishad mantra 9 says, those who engage in a culture of nescient or ignorant activities shall enter into the darkest region of ignorance. So these are the demons. Jai Shri Radha Nilamada Veki Jai Worse still are those engaged in a culture of so-called knowledge. In other words, basically he's saying the Mayavadis are worse than the demons. They're going to a worse place. The demons are already going to the darkest region of ignorance, but the Mayavadis are going in a much worse place. Where is that? If they attain the Brahman realization, they attain a state where there's no devotional service, no possibility of it, and no knowledge of who God is. So in a sense, the Brahman realization is worse than Kaivalya, worse than hell, because there's no possibility of performing devotional service. So they're destined to suffer the worst possible life. Now, the next chapter is the cause of demoniac mentality. There are numerous causes of the demoniac mentality, but in this essay we shall broadly delve into only 3: lust, anger, and greed. In the Bhagavad Gita 16:21, Lord Krishna describes these 3 characteristics as destroyers of the self, portals leading to hell. The Supreme Personality of Godhead is the sole proprietor and enjoyer of everything. When the living entities forget this fact, they develop an intense desire to enjoy this phenomenal world. So in order to become a demoniac sense gratifier, you have to be oblivious of God, forget God completely. And where can you forget? Where can you be educated to forget God? A university, modern university. Yes, schools are considered slaughterhouses by Prabhupada, right? Because you can completely learn to forget God. Even Prabhupada also says that when he went to college, his convictions about the Vedic, let's say, following the Vedic path was weakened. It didn't stop, but it was weakened. And then when he met his guru, it got reignited again. Everything he learned as a child with his father and mother became formalized when he met his guru in 1922. But he did say that during his college years, there was, let's say, a lessening of intensity of huh? He put his deities back in a box. Yeah. Where did you read that? In the what? Lilamrita, yeah. Yeah, in other places he said his fervor became weakened by that association. I've also heard Prabhupada say that there was never a time that he was not Krishna conscious, but he does frankly say that his fervor, his like intense desire to be Krishna conscious was somewhat weakened by the association in the university. Okay, so it says, when the living entities forget this fact, the fact that Krishna is the sole proprietor and enjoyer of everything, they develop an intense desire to enjoy this phenomenal world, but they cannot be fully satisfied by such endeavors, and thus anger develops. Anger causes frustration, as in the story of the unsuccessful fox and the sour grapes. The living entity is then forced to pretend to be a renouncer, but at the bottom of such renunciation burns the great flame of greed and the desire for enjoyment. This is only another stage of material desire. Therefore, unless one transcends the stage of acceptance and rejection of physical pleasures and becomes situated on the platform of the eternal self, one cannot understand the sublime message of the Lord, and without this understanding, one will continue to cultivate the demoniac mentality. Now, this is actually a very profound study of psychology in this paragraph, and it requires thinking very seriously about it. In other words, the cause of the development of the demoniac mentality is forgetfulness of God due to becoming envious of God. So why should Krishna be dancing with the gopis? Why can't I be dancing with the gopis, right? And when the type of enviousness enters into the mind, one rejects the idea that Krishna is the sole proprietor and the supreme enjoyer of everything. And when we become envious, then we want to forget that. We want to erase that thought that God is the enjoyer, God is the proprietor. And one develops the desire to emulate or surpass God by being the supreme enjoyer and proprietor. So one develops then an intense desire to enjoy this phenomenal world, this material world. Well, we can see this path in the normal progress of growing up. Right from early childhood, a child has a desire for sense gratification. Right? It's inherent. Right? And then there's competition for sense gratification, even amongst children. Like I remember the first day I went to school, I was not able to speak English then, and I had taken my favorite little pail and shovel with me to school. And I guess, on recess, I was playing with my shovel and my pail, and some other kid took it away from me. And I got really angry, and it was, I was crying, and there was sort of like a little fight or something. And because I wanted to be proprietor and enjoyer, you see. And then some other kid wanted to be proprietor and enjoyer. So right from childhood, that mentality, that psychology is there, of wanting to be the proprietor and the enjoyer. Then when that's frustrated, there's anger, right? So that same story happens in different levels as we grow up, right? And then, like, for example, you don't think that type of vicious competition is existing between Larry Ellison and previously it was Bill Gates, but who was it? Steve Jobs. Steve Ballmer. Yeah, they hate each other. Ellison hates all his competitors. In fact, he says that, he's the CEO of Oracle. He's a very nasty guy, very nasty. He just dreams about destroying all his competitors.
He said that Amazon does not even know how to make a cloud. He's going to make a new cloud.
Yeah, now he's going to compete with Amazon and Microsoft on the cloud.
The same example in the airline industry.
Yeah.
U.S. Airways, because America West, they purchased U.S. Airways in 2005. Now they purchase American. So the president and the CEO, they were like so close together. But the president always wanted to be the CEO.
Uh-huh.
So now he's like, it's never going to happen as long as the CEO is there. So he left American, actually was let go by the board, saying, it's not going to
Incompatibility.
work out. And he went to United. He got $10 million from American for leaving American.
Yeah.
He got another $12 million for joining United.
Right. Yeah, it's fierce, vicious competition, right? It all started, when they were little kids, right? And it all started from their previous life's karma, right? And it just gets worse and worse. It doesn't get better, it just gets worse. And none of them believe in God. Not one of them. But they all want to attain immortality. They all want to attain immortality. Okay, so we'll stop here today, and we'll continue some more about the demons.
Now Elon Musk is trying to put brain implants.
Yeah,
He's saying so that you can become much smarter than what you are.
Yeah, but Bezos claims that he's going to outdo Musk.
You're going to fight first.
Of course, there's vicious competition. Who's going to go to the moon first? Who's going to get all the precious metals from the asteroids? Who's going to dominate space travel? $100,000 to get a seat on the first.
They're already living in a hell. This is preparing. As Prabhupada says in the next slide, they're going to hellish planet, but they're already sort of living in that kind of condition. And
They don't believe that there's a hell. And, but
to
they.
be able to think like that, they will be having like sleepless nights. It's a miserable thing.
There's no limit to the anxiety of the materialists. Well, why do you think there's so many drugs? There's all these designer drugs now that help you relieve anxiety and give you a false sense of superiority. No intoxication, no media, no illicit sex, no gambling, no speculation. These things save people from becoming demons. But the demons don't believe in that. Even if they're vegetarian, there are some that are vegetarians, right? But it's only to have more sex. It's only to be more healthy to have them. Very vicious world.